Welcome to WizeUp. I'm Paul Arthur, talking today about homeschool. So, a slightly different topic than, I guess, our normal a slew of topics. But, there's been a big increase both in Canada and the US in parents wanting to send, well, I guess not send, keep their kids home to homeschool over the last number of years. So, why is that happening? What are the pros and cons of homeschooling? Before we jump in, quick reminder to hit subscribe. Tell your friends about us as well. Our guest today is Rebecca Spooner. She's a Canadian, but she's joining us from Georgia. And she is the founder of Gather Round Homeschool. She's also a wife and mother of five. She homeschools herself. And you can find them at gatherroundhomeschool.com. So, Rebecca, thanks for making time for us today.
Yeah, excited to be here.
I am too. Lots to talk about here. Can you give us a snapshot of what Gather Round Homeschool is all about?
Yeah, Gather Round Homeschool is curriculum that came about. I never designed to write curriculum. I was a homeschool mom,
Yeah.
but I had this idea from the Lord, came about in prayer. What if you could do school with all your kids together, not jumping around from one subject to the next subject, from one grade to the next grade? I mean, with five kids, I had my hands full and I felt like I was a ping pong ball. And so I really feel like this idea came from a time of prayer, and it's unit study approach for K through 12, where you do all of your subjects together with your kids, other than math, which is a little bit hard to do that way. But
Hmm.
so it's God in the center of everything, and unit study in its approach, and designed to bring families together and really have God in the center of it all.
Okay. Now, there are a lot of people asking about homeschooling and switching. So, what is the driving factor behind that? Any thoughts on why people are now switching?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different reasons that people choose to homeschool. I think I was actually homeschooled myself, so I'm a second gen homeschooler.
Okay.
And I think back in my day, it was more common for people to choose to homeschool as a way of protecting them from
Hmm.
what parents were seeing in the world. I think that that still is ultimately the heart behind it today, but I think that the protection looks a little bit different. I think that, we've got kids that have different learning challenges. We have kids that are being bullied. We have all
Hmm.
sorts of different motivations that are causing parents to feel like they have no option but to pull their kids out and try to find a way to make this work at home. There's probably a lot of parents that feel like they're stuck and that they actually have no option because they've never even considered homeschooling because they feel unqualified or that they can't do that. That has to be somebody else. And so it's growing, but I think there's definitely room for it to grow more.
Yeah, I think that's that parental instinct to protect your kids when you see what's happening in many of our public schools. And so there's concerns over that for sure. That's certainly a part of it there. When you think about homeschool, though, I know when I was brought up in public school, okay, big city. And times have changed though. I mean, I'm 62 now, so this goes back a ways. But when I was first asked about, hey, have you guys ever considered homeschooling? And I kind of went, yeah, all those kids are weird. No, we haven't. Honestly, that was my thought. But the person talking to me about this wasn't weird, and his kids weren't weird. So, but I think the biggest concern for many people is the socialization factor. Then the kids will grow up to be weird and antisocial, right? So, how would you respond to that?
I mean, I feel like there's the traditional responses to that. I hope I am a walking advertisement as someone who was homeschooled through most of my education. I believe that hopefully people would look at me and say, "Hey, she's a well-adjusted adult." But I think that the important thing to note is homeschool kids are different. And I think that it's worth just calling it out and saying it like it is. Homeschool kids are different. And what makes them different are things like, they're not afraid to talk. They're not afraid to engage with an adult, to engage with people of different ages because they actually have a broader socialization because they have not grown up in this isolated environment where they are surrounded by only their peers and only know how to talk to that age range. So instead, you have homeschool kids that in the moment in side by side with their peers may seem different because they're able to talk confidently to an adult, talk confidently to someone who is their senior, talk confidently to someone who is younger, and have that empathy because they've grown up in a totally different environment. So I think, I mean, it's different, but I think that it actually ends up being a strength. And I think where you start to see that is actually once kids graduate and they start to enter the adult world, homeschool kids, there's not this awkward, like, who am I? Because they've had their entire K through 12 actually figuring that out, which gives them a leg up.
Yeah, they are different. A comment we often get is, why are your kids? I mean, there's something different here. That they seem quite respectful, and yeah, like what's going on here? I mean, strangers have actually walked up that way, so there is a difference, I think, certainly in some ways. Now, how does homeschooling work? What's involved? And people may think, well, okay, maybe I don't know, but how does this work? You're at home. Uh, we might have a couple kids who might have five kids like you do. How would you possibly do that? How many hours a day does this take? It probably takes you from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I mean, first off, there's always the initial, like, I don't feel qualified. I'm not a teacher. How am I going to be able to teach my kids these subjects? And then you have, the idea of, well, what is required in order to do this? And that does look different depending on your province or depending on what state or where you live. There's different requirements and different ways that it looks. And then there's the questions of, yeah, exactly. Can someone just give me a template of what this looks like and what like a typical day is? I think in my experience, first of all, there are so many resources to help you get started and figure out what you need. And most states and provinces are a whole lot easier than you think. It's actually usually very easy to homeschool, as simple as possibly notifying someone that you're doing it. And usually, in most cases, you're generally left alone. There are some areas, like I said, that are a little bit more rigorous. As far as curriculum, you have to know that curriculum is designed to actually guide you through it. So you're not going to have to know everything. Even teachers who go to school for a long time do not know everything about every subject. They are still studying a lesson plan and preparing before the class, and you're going to be doing the same thing. So the curriculum you buy is actually going to be open and go. It's going to have guides for the teachers. So you don't have to know everything in order to homeschool. One of the best things is that you actually get to learn alongside your kids, which changes the entire environment from being me teacher, you student, to instead being this kind of facilitator role. I think of it like, when you look at ancient Greek or ancient Rome, or even if you watch like a show where you see Jesus at 12 years old and he's like talking and debating with people, it was a discussion-based learning model. It was, asking questions and discovering things together. And I think that is the rich education that you get with homeschooling when you shift your mindset from the traditional model that you kind of expect education to look like.
And there are, of course, different ways people homeschool. There are some that really do it very similarly to the way a public school would do, but simply at home. So there is that approach. But it sounds to me like you're doing a different type of approach. I think most homeschools do, I think, what you're doing, and that is you're integrated with family together, and you're actually studying with the different ages. So you might have somebody in grade one and somebody who's, maybe 12 or 13, and they're actually studying things together, except for, like you point out, the math, for example, has to be somewhat different in certain areas of chemistry or whatever, these kinds of things. But so a lot of things they can actually study together. Can you explain how that works and how that's possible?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a crazy idea, but in some ways, we're really just going back to how education used to happen, the one room schoolhouse model. And I think everybody who starts off homeschooling probably naturally leans towards what we call traditional. And that's where you are kind of stuck in the system and the way that things are, right? You have all of your different subjects. You are the teacher. You probably buy all of the desks and you create a schoolroom and you have recesses and breaks and lunches and you go get all the little packages. And I mean, that's kind of how we start because it's the model that most people know. As you get more comfortable with it, as you start to explore different types of curriculum, as you start to realize that, hey, my confidence is growing and I actually have the ability to do this. And my kids don't have to be relegated to just this one grade or this one topic because that's where they're at. We can actually all be learning together, then I think you start to see parents transition a little bit more to a one room schoolhouse model. And in a one room schoolhouse model, depending again on the curriculum you're using, you're either bouncing around helping all of the different kids. You might have older kids even helping their younger siblings,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
reinforcing learning for them while it's teaching a younger student and taking something off your shoulders. So there's just so much chemistry that can happen in a one room schoolhouse environment. Or you're teaching a topic or having a discussion with your whole family, and you've got a younger student who maybe it's mostly going over their head while they're playing with Lego, but they catch just like the tiniest little bit off the surface. Meanwhile, you have a child who's middle, kind of grade, and they're picking up a little bit more, and your high schooler is getting that much deeper. And so you start to see this kind of scaffolded approach, which is how education happens. Not that we have to teach all of these different topics, but rather that these topics are actually building on one another. And I think that's one of the benefits that you start to see when you're homeschooling a family and you switch your mindset.
Okay, if you're just joining us, we're speaking with Rebecca Spooner and her website, gatherroundhomeschool.com. And there's lots of interesting stuff there, including a curriculum that you have developed yourself here. Tell us a bit about the curriculum that you use, and I guess, what's the benefit of your particular approach to this?
Yeah. So, I mean, speaking to the one room schoolhouse, obviously that's really the heart behind it. It is no more you having to bounce around from one student to the next. We kind of take all of the homeschool styles, so Charlotte Mason, unit study, child directed learning, even traditional, and we blend it together in this unit study model. So you're going to teach your kids all together around one topic while you're sipping coffee and sitting around on the couch, and you're going to have discussions, and you're going to go on rabbit trails. You're going to look things up and look at videos, look at pictures, and probably go off on a million different tangents as your kids are asking questions. And then there is a student book for each individual age. And in those student pages, what we do is we take the topic that they learned about. So let's say, for example, it's a North American birds unit. So you're learning about birds, which is a science topic. But then we weave it into, and I like to give the picture of like a spider web, into all the other subjects specifically to see how it connects. Because one of the problems with education is we can get really stuck on quantity over quality, and we just want to stuff information in our kids' heads, again, for the sake of a test that they're maybe not necessarily retaining. And so when you start to have contextual learning where things have meaning, because first of all, it was their interest. They're so excited about birds, so they chose that unit. And then we weave it into and show you how that connects to all of your other subjects. You start to see learning that means something and therefore sticks. So if you were learning about the migration pattern of a bird, you might have a geography page where you're going to be charting the migration pattern of a bird, seeing where you live. Do you live near that? How far away? So there's all sorts of geography activities we can do. You might have a social studies page where we're talking about migration and how that's really similar to the word immigration, but those are different things. That's kind of where we're going to stop with the younger ages. Whereas for older ages, we're going to go into immigration, have them looking up some of the policies for their country and digging into it more. So we take this scaffolded approach where the whole family is learning the same thing, but at different levels, which now brings the family around the dinner table at night. Dad comes home from work. What did you guys learn today? And you can have, again, this conversation around the table because everyone's on the same page. So it's a very different
Yeah.
model of education. And again, just we weave in all of the subjects. And the idea is that the family as a unit is moving together rather than being
Well,
divided.
family is the building block of society, and the more we can get family doing things together, whether that's praying together or just spending time together rather than off on our own individual, I'm going to play video games all day or whatever it is, just myself focused on something rather than doing things together. I mean, that's a good thing if we can do things together. You also have an online academy. So, again, I guess there's the book approach, that sort of thing, and there's also an online approach. And any thoughts on that?
Yeah, what we're seeing is, like I said, the old generation of homeschoolers, me, we like to be very independent. We probably went into homeschooling because we're a little bit rebellious. We kind of like to do things our own way. We don't really want anyone telling us what to do. But I'm recognizing that there is a new generation of homeschoolers, and they are brand new at this. They're really overwhelmed. They feel like they don't know what to do, and they really just want someone to hold their hand and walk them through, whether that's just for a year or two until you get your feet under you, or for the whole journey. There's a lot of people that are pulling their kids out that work, both parents work. It's hard in this economy for one parent to stay at home and homeschool their kids and not have that dual income. And so we're seeing this transition as to what homeschooling can look like. And that is why we created our online academy. So we've basically taken our courses, we have live classes, we have on demand video classes, and we're now bringing in grading so that there's consistency and there's motivation. A lot of kids are struggling with motivation, and there's support, again, depending on what a family needs. You just want to get the curriculum, you can do that. But if you need more support in order to feel like homeschooling is possible for you, it's still going to be better than immersing your kids in an environment where they're really struggling, such as a public school system.
Okay, that's fascinating. Thanks for sharing that. Again, Rebecca Spooner, our guest, and the website gatherroundhomeschool.com. I was just thinking here too, with students with different interests. That I guess that's one of the advantages of a homeschooling approach, is that certain kids have a bent this way. They're artistic. The next person might be very much mathematically, logically inclined, and so forth. And it's good to be well-rounded and to learn about all these different things, even the things you're not good at or maybe not interested in. But when you're looking for, what is my call in life? What do I want to do for a living and enjoy it and something that I'm good at? Maybe you're a mechanic and you don't really care much about Shakespeare, and that maybe needs to be more of your focus. You can actually do that with the homeschooling approach, right?
Yeah, definitely. You can follow their interests. You can really tailor it to them. And I think that that leads to a really important conversation, and that is that education is changing. The future of our world, because of AI and different things, and I'm not in
Mm,
the camp of I'm afraid of it, but I do see it changing industries. I see the current model of the need for the traditional, college and university and that degree up on your wall. I think that's changing rapidly. It used to be that information, you had to have somebody who was trained in information. Because of the internet, because of AI, information is no longer the problem.
mm,
Anyone can get that information. So I think we're going to start to see a transition. And I think that what makes homeschooling cutting edge, I really believe cutting edge. You want to prepare your kids for what's coming next, is that we need to not just give our kids information. We need to be focusing on wisdom and discernment. They need to take
mm,
that knowledge and learn how to apply it. They need to take that knowledge and know what they should do with it. That is what a school system is not doing. They are learning information for the sake of a test. But when you're homeschooling your kids, you can train up a child in the way they should go, their natural instincts, their gifts, their strengths, even their weaknesses. You can custom tailor around those things, and you can equip your kids to not just learn information, but rather to know how to apply that information,
mm.
which I think those are going to be the kids that are honestly leaders
Yeah,
in the next generation.
well said. I've noticed there's a very highly competitive job market out there around the globe, and lots of people with, like you say, good schooling, good grades, lots of information. I find a lot of companies maybe struggle finding somebody they can trust.
Mhm.
Who can I trust? Who's going to be honest? Who's going to be diligent? Who's going to represent my company well? You're looking for quality character traits, and you don't get that in just regular school, do you? That needs to be, I think, a bit, that's our job as parents, isn't it? And so that there's a big advantage, I think, if our kids have grown up with that character, godly quality development. So big advantage there. And now, what about cons? I said at the beginning of the program, are there some cons to homeschooling? And I guess one thing I hear sometimes, and understandably so, well, you don't have the sports facilities or the sports teams that you might have in a public school, for example.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, you may have access to less resources. In reality, all of the funding and taxes is not going into this kind of model. It's going to the schools. And so you have a
Yeah.
lot less financial support. You have a lot less access to some of those things, which means that there's more cost. That is a reality. If you want to put your kids in sports, you're going to have to pay for it. You're going to have to pay for co ops. You're going to have to pay for group activities in order to kind of cultivate that with your kids. There's a lot of people that get creative. They get homeschool groups together. They find other people that they can join together with. They get creative to get PE and get their kids active and doing
Hmm.
things. I
Hmm.
mean, you don't have to play a sport to get outside and get active. So, they get outside and do things other ways, like family hikes and whatever that may look like. There's no question it's different. It's definitely different. But I think that anything that you could say that you could get at school and you couldn't get at home, I would just argue that it's possible to get those things. It might look different. It might cost a little bit, but it's possible to still get access to those things, even if you have to be the one to make it yourself.
Okay. Yeah, and it is tough on parents as well. Again, a lot of us do feel unqualified. Um, Although, again, as you point out, there are resources available. Often there's a homeschool facilitator you can be in contact with, or online in contact with some teachers who will help you and so forth. But I do find that often there can be somewhat of a compromise on the academic side of things, depending on the level of skill I guess a parent has in this, and of course finding the time to do that, especially if you have a larger family. So it's a bit of a challenge, I think, in some ways. Although again, I do know families as well who have just had amazing results, and their kids are off to university and doing super well. Um, but you know what? As I mentioned just earlier, to me, I guess as a Christian parent, whose number one goal would be to produce children who are in love with Jesus and in love with their fellow human beings. And, creating those people who are just, I guess, heavenly minded, but doing a lot of earthly good as well. And that's got to be the number one thing. And that to me is more important than actually academically excelling. I want to do both, but I'd rather, I guess, err on the side of getting that other one right first. Your thoughts?
Yeah. I think that our definition of success is incredibly important because before we
Mm,
realize it, we are going to be running after something that really wasn't the most important goal. If you ask
mm,
most Christian homeschool parents, why are you doing this or what's the most important thing to you? They'll tell you that my kids are following Jesus. That is what they'll say. But sometimes our actions can show otherwise because of comparison, because of FOMO, because we see what everyone else is doing around us and we feel like maybe we're missing out or doing something wrong. Before we know it, we can be pursuing a path that is leading us towards academics, GPAs, so that we'll look good, which ultimately is kind of because we want to look good. I think that exactly what is the most important thing, what is our definition of success, is raising kids who know who they are. First and foremost, they know their identity. They know their identity in Christ. I mean, we can put all sorts of great things into our kids, but if they don't know who they are, if they don't know their identity in Christ, if they're not grounded and rooted, then they are going to get shaken. They are going to get tossed by the waves and winds of this world, and they're not going to be able to stand. So we need to have our kids and their roots go deep. And I think that goes to that verse, right? Seek first the kingdom and all these things will be
mm.
added to you, rather than getting worried about all these things. And I'm not saying compromise on education. I believe that it's possible to honestly have even a superior education at home. But I think that the priority, and that's at least for me, the priority is their heart, their character, their relationship with God, their relationship with each other. And I feel like if they have those pieces, learning that can happen. That can happen at any
Hmm.
point in their life. They can
Yeah,
pick up anything for the sake of a
yeah.
job or a career, but who they are, that's the one piece that I have this limited amount of time to impart. And that's the thing that's lasting. That's the kingdom aspect that is really going to matter.
Yeah, I like that. And of course, kids do work at different paces,
Mhm.
different speeds. They learn in different ways. And that, I guess, would be an advantage of homeschooling, wouldn't it? I mean, you know your child better than anyone else. So you see this child learns in a different way and at a different speed. So you can adjust that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. You get to pace it with your kids. And I think, again, it comes down to that confidence level because there's a lot of parents that if you feel like your kids, because again, your measuring stick is based off of everyone else and the definition of success that has been drawn for you in the school system, you might look at grade 5 or grade 2 and think my kid is behind because they're
Hmm.
struggling, because they're learning different, they're struggling with reading, they have dyslexia, whatever your situation may be, because we're measuring ourselves by this rather than allowing ourselves the confidence, the freedom, and the permission to let our kids grow at their own pace, bringing in support when we need support, but being able to let them grow at their own pace without pushing them towards some arbitrary line. Because this line, you guys, this line that we get so focused on, all that line is the ones who excelled and the ones who struggled, and a line drawn in the middle is not even real. Most kids are not on that line. They're everywhere in between. It's just a line had to be drawn, a standard. And if that's the standard we're measuring by, it's not ultimately the best standard for our individual kids.
And I think you have to experiment some as well. Different ways kids learn. Some are more visual. Um, I mean, we had one child who was struggling with reading, and but when we finally found what he was interested in reading, it was amazing. How much of a difference that made when you're reading on a specific subject that you're passionate about. How things start to click. So there's all kinds of different approaches that we can use, and of course, it's important too to, I think, get some good fellowship going with other homeschoolers, so you can learn from each other, learn from your mistakes, learn from your successes, right? And at the same time, make sure you're also reaching out to, those around you, those who are public schooling, your neighbors, get to know everybody you can as much as you can, learn from them, etc. So I'm running out of time here, but I want to give you a chance just to tell us any final thoughts, I guess, on why parents should consider this possibility of homeschooling, and why your curriculum would be helpful for them.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, definitely if you're on the fence about homeschooling, if you've been
Hmm.
thinking about it, if you've been wondering if it's an option for you, I would pray about it. I would pray about it. I would ask the Lord. I would not listen to what everyone else is doing. Don't hop on this just because it's some trending bandwagon that you think is maybe a superior option. I would pray about it and I would seek the Lord, because ultimately when we are being obedient to him, then none of your objections matter. None of your worries matter, none of your anxieties matter, none of your insecurities matter. He's going to equip you for what he's called you to do. And so if you feel that stirring in your heart, if you feel like, there's something on this, talk to your spouse, make sure you guys are on the same page, that there's
Hmm.
a unity between you, and then leap. Just leap. I'm telling you.
Gotta leave it there. Gotta take the leap. Thank you so much, Rebecca. All right, again, gatherroundhomeschool.com. Thanks for watching WizeUp.ca.